Hello, Anthro 134N class. Today we will be discussing campus sexual violence. The CDC defines sexual violence as sexual activity when consent is not obtained or freely given, whereas the National Sexual Violence Resource Center defines it as means that someone forces or manipulates someone else into unwanted sexual activity without consent. These acts can include rape, sexual coercion, and unwanted contact. They can also be non contact, such as verbal or psychological harassment. Some of the main factors that contribute to campus violence include alcohol and drug abuse alone, as well as alcohol and drug abuse combined with stereotypes against women, lack of understanding consent, and low reporting percentage and attitudes and norms about sex itself. Furthermore, it's important to understand that sexual violence can affect anyone, including men, women, children, teens, adults, and even elders. Although anyone can experience sexual violence, different groups have different risks. For example, women in the age range of 18 to 24 are at considerably higher risk. With that being said, statistically, 1.9 million women are raped and 6.54 million women encounter acts of sexual violence each year. A popular belief about sexual violence is that it occurs by a stranger, which is not the case. 80% of cases, the victim has known the offender. To finish up on the background, victims of sexual violence experience a large range of health problems, including trauma, STDs, poor mental health, which is why this issue needs to be addressed.
So the prevalence of sexual harassment is that overall, in general, almost half of all students have experienced sexual harassment since enrolling into college. And more specifically, it varies across across genders and school matriculation status. So whether they're freshmen, sophomore, or basically undergrad or graduate. So transgender, genderqueer, TGQN, and women have the highest rates of sexual harassment, with 23% and 26% respectively. And the next highest were male undergrads with 7%, and then the lowest were male graduate students. And I got this from the source of the Association of American Universities. And going more into the causes of campus sexual violence, of the campus sexual violence and equity, as Megan mentioned, some of them are alcohol and drug abuse, as well as attitudes and norms about sex. And going further into alcohol and drug abuse and drug use, alcohol consumption can either be from both the victims and the perpetrator, or just the victim alone or the perpetrator alone. And one thing to know about this fact is that while alcohol doesn't cause someone to be an offender or a victim, um, it can reduce the inhibitations of offenders, and it can make victims helpless. Um, and also, attending a college where heavy drinking is the norm uh, is correlated with increased weekly drinking, which in return is is associated with increased odds of sexual victimization. And going on to drug use, there's a connection between alcohol and drug facilitated rape, and that being 84% of drug facilitated rape involved alcohol consumption. So as this shows, the use of alcohol and drug combined really increases the the odds of someone experiencing or being a perpetrator of sexual assault. And an important thing to know as well is that regardless of the circumstances, sexual assault is never the victim's fault. And yeah, that's just something really important to remember.
Another main cause of campus sexual violence is the lack of understanding of what consent is and when it is needed. By consent, we mean actively agreeing to an intimate or sexual activity with someone else. It's also important to note that consent also means people can change their mind at any time. One study published in 2017 measured male and female perceptions regarding sexual consent at a university. It found that men do not interpret explicit sexual consent as more necessary in sexual or intimate behavior compared to women. This shows a discrepancy between men and women's ideas about consent, which can lead to more inequity in the problem of campus sexual violence. Another big cause of the inequity in campus sexual violence is that victims are often afraid to report what happened to the authorities. Contrary to popular belief, the majority of sexual violence victims on uh, oh, the majority of sexual violence victims on college campuses knew their attacker. As a result, victims are scared of reprisal, victim blaming within their own social groups, or other personally detrimental things that may happen if they were to come forward. In addition, Betsy DeVos, our Secretary of Education, has made changes to Title IX that may also prevent victims from reporting. These changes include making it so that off-campus instances of sexual violence can be dismissed by the school, and also allowing victims to be questioned by their rapist's family member or friend. Making it so that victims are less likely to report their assaults prevents them from receiving justice, and it may result in more instances of sexual violence if the perpetrator is never caught.
In order to end campus sexual violence, it's important to focus on prevention to reduce the number of victims that suffer every day. For this reason, our action plan consists of extending on-campus workshops and trainings to universities that don't have them in order to combat rape culture, which is the societal normalization of sexual violence. This is to address the role of alcohol and drug use and lack of understanding of consent. As mentioned previously, men and women do not have the same understanding nor value of sexual consent. Therefore, it's essential to teach students, especially those who are male identifying, what consent is and isn't, and the signs to look out for when they are under the influence of drugs and alcohol. For example, if someone is too inebriated to say no, then there's no way they can consent. In order to change the attitudes and norms about sex and consent, college campuses can provide bystander training, intervention training for students, which works by empowering them to be active participants in stopping sexual violence. An example would be the Green Dot Bystander Intervention Training that educates students on how to safely intervene in different types of risky situations. We also plan to mobilize men as allies through workshops on social emotional learning and increasing conversations on safe dating in order to change the norms that increase the likelihood of sexual violence to occur.
Our workshops also hope to target the reported fears of, or the fears of reporting sexual violence among college students. So in doing that, these workshops will aim to inform of the existing channels of reporting both on and off campus, and really hope to establish within the audience that these resources are safe places to report sexual violence with no repercussions. Our goal is to create a web of support among well-informed students. So hopefully these students may go on to utilize these resources in the unfortunate case that them or someone they know may be either victims, bystanders, or witnesses to a sexual assault. This concludes our presentation. I hope we gave you a good insight on the issue of campus or college campus sexual violence. And hopefully our action plan is effective in combating the issue. Thank you.